Hey everybody, it's Dave here and Darren over there. We are your two old bloggers, been talking publicly about the Minnesota Vikings for over 2 decades apiece. And we're here for an early Saturday version of the show we missed last week, where we'll be talking about Dalvin Cook. You're telling me there's a chance he might stay with the Vikings? Then we get into our second theme, which will be players with bullseyes on their back. Who might be expendable? Who might be targeted? I even had an extra one come up this morning that didn't make the list. Interesting. That person, by the way, is Cam Bynum. Makes you go, And then finally, Darren wanted to take a deeper dive look into Jaren Hall, the backup quarterback we just signed, and what his prospect is for the team. Will he be the number 3? Could he take over the number 2 job? Could he be the quarterback of the future? Who knows? We'll find out next on Two Old Bloggers. Vikings First and SKOL presents This Week in Vikings Land with Darren and Dave, your two old bloggers. Hey everybody, it's Dave here once again, Darren over there. As you know, Darren missed last week, and after 10 or 15 minutes of solo, Justin joined me and we had a great conversation. But Darren is back. Tell us why you missed last week.
I missed last week because we were having some major forest fires in the Northwest Territories, and part of my job is I work in communications, and I was on call because we had to put out some public communications and information to folks about some of those wildfires. And things came up, and I was on call, and I couldn't tell him, sorry, I'm doing the two old bloggers today. I can't put out those emergency public communications because I'm talking Vikings football. So that's what happened.
Well, hey, I'm sure they would have understood.
Yeah,
how
yeah.
how's it going?
Much better. The still really dry conditions up here and all through Western Canada, actually. But the main fire, which caused an evacuation of about 4,000 people in two small communities in the Northwest Territories. They're all small communities, but these ones are smaller than where I live, and they've been evacuated for like 11 days, and they were just one community just got allowed back. They ended the evacuation order on Thursday, and those folks are back in their homes, thankfully. But the fire is still going. It's held, as they call it in forest fire lingo. So that means it's not growing. It's not under control, but it's not growing. So they felt the risk was less enough to allow this one community and their people to come back, because most of them have been living. Some of them have been in an evacuation center here in Yellowknife. Some of them were living in other places with friends that they knew. But it's just quite a bit of an upheaval for those people. And if they could get back in their community, then they made the call to do so. But things are a little bit better, but it's going to be a whole summer like this, Dave. I think where it's going to be dry conditions, not much rain. Fortunately, in where I live in the Northwest Territories, it's a huge territory and not very many people living in it. So there's lots of fires that go on every summer, but they're not near anything, so it's not a big deal. In this case, we had one about 5 kilometers from a community of about 4,000 people, and that's a little bit more serious.
Okay, gotcha. So what you're telling everybody is to be flexible on the weekends here on out until we get out of fire season.
There may be times I'll be on call, yes, but I do have other people, staff. Will probably be a rotation thing, but we'll all work around it.
Great. Well, let's get this show started I'm going to flip over to the other screen. We named this one, Is There Still a Chance for Dalvin Cook to Stay with the Vikings? And there was more news on that this week. Starting with
There was.
Theme 1. A chance.
It seems, I don't know. In some ways, I can't believe we're still talking about this, Dave. But here we are. Dalvin Cook is still part of the Minnesota Vikings, even though we thought he would be. Some of us, even me, thought this situation would have been resolved. If you'd asked me in February, would we be getting into June and Dalvin Cook would still be on the team? I would have told you I don't think so. But here he is. But even he's still on the team. But if you looked at social media or listened to me a lot of times, you'd be like, I don't think there's a very good chance that Dalvin Cook's going to be on the team. The Vikings put out social media about their schedule a couple of weeks ago. They had Alexander Mattison on as part of that, and you'd never see Alexander Mattison promoting anything for the Vikings in past years over Dalvin Cook. That people latched onto that. That they felt that was, I felt that was a bit of a significant sign that the Vikings were maybe moving on, sending a little bit of signals. But then Jeremy Fowler got on SportsCenter, and 2 weeks ago, this is old news now, but he got on 2 weeks ago and he
Still
reported
relevant.
he reported that, hey, the Vikings they're open. They want to do right by Dalvin Cook, and that's something that I think has been a theme with Kwesi and Kevin O'Connell. You heard Adam Thielen talk about how they were class. They treated him with class, even though they ended up releasing him. Fowler said the Vikings want to do the same thing by Dalvin Cook. They want him wherever he ends up in 2023. They want him to be happy and to be used a lot there. But that's not necessarily going to be outside of Minnesota. According to Fowler, there's been a lot of communication between Cook and the Vikings, something that didn't happen with Zadarius Smith and the Vikings. And so the lines of communication have been open. Everything was on the table that could be traded, could be released, could be a restructured contract, and he's back in Minnesota. And again, this week, I think what you're alluding to, if I'm getting right, Dave, you can correct me, is that there was, I think Doogie Wolfson talked about how Cook is now open to coming back at less than the salary that he's under contract for, which would be that's a lot different than what we heard a month ago, even a few weeks ago, where the scuttlebutt was that Cook was not going to take a pay cut from the Vikings to stay with the Vikings. He was going to play under the contract that he has, or he was going to be moving on. And so this is a big difference, and that might make a difference in how the Vikings view this. But I'd had some pretty good. I had a good conversation on our Gallahorn Facebook site with a Gallahorn member, kind of back and forth on the Cook situation, and he made some good points about why if the Vikings were going to move on from Cook, why are they keeping him here this long? Talked about the Madison thing, like, do the Vikings really feel that Madison is, the de facto number one guy? Is that something that they really believe in? And he made a number of good points. I thought I made some too, but when you're looking, I think still, as I look at the whole situation, it seems a bit, I think, it just doesn't feel like the things are lined up for Dalvin Cook to be back with the Vikings. One reason that the Vikings would keep Dalvin Cook this long, even though they've now got 9.5, 9.6 in cap space, which is a hell of a lot more than they had a few weeks ago. A lot of that is thanks to the Zadarius Smith trade, but they've got more cap space, so they don't need to get rid of Cook. But by keeping Cook now, and it looks like it's going to happen past June the 1st. One of the things that really, if the Vikings traded Cook post June 1st, as opposed to releasing him post June 1st, that lessens the dead cap that they're going to get hit by about $2 million. And it would up the amount of cap space they get by $2 million. For the Vikings, who are looking at, they're going to have to do something with Danielle Hunter. looks like they might have to do something, maybe even with Justin Jefferson here, if he keeps on missing OTAs. And take care of those guys, take care of Hunter, still have enough to comfortably get through the season with that old rainy day fund you're always talking about, Dave. Then
Yep, at least
an
5 million,
extra,
at least.
yeah, an extra 2 million above what you'd get if you just release Cook is important to Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. So if they trade him, that's potentially more cap savings for them. Now, the other part of that is that if you do trade him, it's likely that the Vikings are going to have to pay some of that salary to the team that they traded him to, just like what happened with Za'Darius Smith. So that might cut into your cap savings a little bit. But still, if you can do that and get a day 3 draft pick as a result, as opposed to just releasing Dalvin Cook and not getting anything, I think Kwesi Adofo-Mensah would prefer that, just like he did with Za'Darius Smith. So I think they're still trying to trade him.
There was rumor came up yesterday or the day before that the Cowboys may be interested because they want a 2-headed monster, and of course they lost Ezekiel.
And
they may take his whole salary, but give a 4th next year and a 5th the following year. And you're not going to get higher picks because you're taking that much salary.
Yes.
That's the cost of taking that much salary.
Yeah.
If that offer and that rumor is true, I take it in a heartbeat. But
that's right, Dave. You're running up there. So I think the waiting to June 1st. That's to possibly trade him and get something for him beyond just the cap relief. I think that's why they've kept him this long. Maybe it doesn't pan out, but maybe it does. And the other thing is that beyond the trading, and another reason why I don't think Cook was never going to stay here is because I just don't understand the Alexander Mattison signing. Like, I know that Mattison, yes, maybe the market was soft with him, but he signed pretty much right away in free agency with the Vikings. You can't tell me he could have waited a week and found some other place to land. And I just don't understand why a guy who, like Mattison, would re-sign with the Vikings if he was told that by the way, Alexander, we're going to bring back Dalvin Cook too.
It's been reported many times. It has been inferred to Mattison that he's going to get a lot more touches this season, and that he's basically going to be running back 1.
Yeah, there's just if you're Mattison, you're 25, you're in your prime, and last year you've been behind. Why would you resign with a team that's going to bring back the guy you've been sitting behind for 4 years? Mm-hmm. And last year you had the least amount of carries you've had in your 4 years. If I'm Mattison, I'm just like, no. If I'm Mattison, I'm just like, I'm going to go somewhere else where I have a chance to actually play more, even if it means taking a little bit less money, because I could maybe earn that back in incentives, in production bonuses or something, as opposed to a guaranteed salary. But I'm not going back to the Vikings to get 50 carries a year sitting behind Dalvin Cook. I'm just not doing that. Mm-hmm. But he signed, which tells me that there's just, again, that the plan was never to have Dalvin Cook coming back. So, hey, is there a chance, like the Dumb and Dumber guys? Cook is still on the team, so I guess there's a chance. But it just, to me, it just doesn't make any sense. I don't feel that Dalvin Cook is Minnesota's the place where Dalvin Cook is going to be. Now, trading him, what would be the location? Like, there's been talk about how all the talk was about Miami. Miami, he's going to go back to Florida. He's going to go back to Miami. But Miami doesn't need him anymore. They got Jeff Wilson. They got Jeff Wilson back. He's back. They re-signed Mostert, and then they drafted the kid from Texas A&M. So they don't need him. But a place that might be a landing spot for him would be the Buffalo Bills. And I'm not saying that because of the guy you've got up there in the photo, his brother James Cook. That whole feel-good story about the Cook brothers play together and all that stuff. I don't think that would have very little to do with Cook getting traded to Buffalo. I think what makes Buffalo a good landing spot for Cook is you look at the Buffalo Bills depth chart at running back. You got James Cook, who played well as a rookie last year, but didn't get a ton of work. And then behind him, you've got Damian Harris, the ex-Patriots guy. You've got Nyheim Hines, who's basically a gadget player and not a full-time running back, not somebody who's going to get even 100 carries a year. And the other guy that they got is 93-year-old Latavius Murray. So, yeah, like the Ale train. Loved Latavius when he was here, but he's not 93, he's 33. But still, when you look at that depth chart for the Buffalo Bills, a Super Bowl contending team, you know, adding Dalvin Cook, especially a guy who ran an 80-yard touchdown against them to the house last year, getting Cook, who's coming off successful shoulder surgery, that, and you don't have to give up a whole lot to get him. I think that'd be quite appealing for Buffalo. There's been no rumors that I've heard about this, but it just seems like looking at their depth chart,
that's one of the names that's always been mentioned. Northfius mentioned Steelers. Being friends with a lot of Steelers guys on Fans First Sports Network, or blogging or podcasting network, they're talking about it. So it's going to be interesting. Now, a couple weeks ago, prior to this week, bookies.com had the odds on where Dalvin was going, and they had the best odds staying in Minnesota. Now, like I said, this is a week old, so take it with a grain of salt. But they had the best odds for Minnesota. Then comes in second New England, followed by the Rams, the Texans, the Cardinals, plus 1,000 to the Bears, and I've heard that too, rumblings. The Bills, there's your Bills at 1,200, and then the field. The Steelers would obviously come in the field portion of that, but we shall see. It would be it's going to be interesting if the trade gets done. And then how much does the Vikings pay and how much does the new team pay?
Yeah.
So we've already paid him guaranteed, was it $2 or $3 million, because he did have a shoulder surgery, and that's going to that bonus got guaranteed. Now, I'd like to take a minute to recognize everybody that's here. I've already brought up Northfius, absolutely Jason, Aaron from here in Austin. It's a sort of cloudy, hazy day here in Austin, but the temperatures aren't too bad. Ron is here joining us. The great and wonderful, beautiful Miss Mary Fisk. Raymond joined us as well. Chuck, good to see you. Good to see you. Jason, let's see. Justin is there. Justin has a little secret announcement here at the end of the show for him. And then let's see who else popped up that I have missed. Clinton, good. Of course, the one and only Bob Swede. And let's see who else. Did I miss anybody? Got Raymond already. But that is it. And if I missed you, I'm sorry. Travis, I see you there. Thank you all for coming and watching Two Old Bloggers. That brings us to theme 2. Players with bullseyes.
Yeah, well, I thought I got this idea because as we get into the off season, Dave, you're like, we're all dreaming about the Vikings 2023 season and looking at the roster construction and looking at it and saying, well, if this guy has a big year, or this guy comes back and he comes back from injury and he's healthy this year, or if this guy comes back from a subpar year and he has his best season ever, or if this guy, this rookie really takes a step up in his play in year 2, the Vikings are going to go 17-0. Mm-hmm. So I think there's certain guys that just, I feel that, they're going to have to play well for the Vikings to be the team that we want them to be. If they don't play well, then, the outcome in 2023 might not be as good as we would like. And a couple of people that I wanted to, a couple of players that I thought of that I've got bullseyes on this year that I'm really going to watching that I think really have to perform well and step up their play are Marcus Davenport, the free agent signing, the edge rusher that we got from New Orleans, and Ed Ingram. And we'll get to Davenport first. It was a signing that when it happened, I liked the signing. I liked it then. I still do. I like the cost that we got him from. I like the fact that he'd had a bit of a down year last year production wise, but we only committed to 1 year. So this is a look and see contract with Davenport, and I like that kind of low risk, low cost approach that we took to Davenport. Now, the other reason I liked it is that uh, was that they need. I think they needed another edge rusher. Once we traded Zadarius Smith, though, that leaves some question marks to the Vikings pass rush, because even with Zadarius Smith last year, the Vikings pass rush was not very good. I get throwing out this ESPN's had some metrics, and they had the Vikings ranked 27th in their pass rush win metric. They had them 30th in pressure rate, and then 23rd in sacks per drop back. So that's not very good. And now, if you'd had
It's
all
not great,
three,
that's for sure.
and if we all watched the games last year, Dave. How many times did we say, "Man, they're not getting any pressure with the four guys that they're with the four guys that they're sending," right? So with Zadarius Smith gone, that really you can basically pencil in Davenport as the guy who's going to be the other edge rusher opposite Danielle Hunter. Well, we all know that Davenport only had half a sack last year, but he's always been consistently been very good with a pressure rate, even when he doesn't get to the quarterback, and that's still valuable. If you look at again, ESPN had him down as he is 10.2% pressure rate is in the past 2 years is 16th among 123 players with at least 500 snaps. So that's pretty good. If you can get that kind of player, if Davenport can play that way for the Vikings, opposite of Danielle Hunter, then I think that the Vikings pass rush should be pretty effective, especially working with Brian Flores, and Flores not just depending on the rushing four, but rushing five sometimes, maybe, and rushing five from different spots, and the different looks that he's going to give offensive lines,
which
causing
which
confusion.
safeties he comes up, which linebackers he's got shooting gaps.
Yeah,
It's going to cause a nightmare, and a pressure generator helps that. Now, it's on one of the shows I was on. They were talking about pressures and how I pointed out the pressures, even though they may not translate into sacks, because sacks is sort of a fluky stat. Um, Generally, a good edge rusher will have high pressure rate his whole time. And then the sack
mm-hmm.
totals you may see go up, and then you may see it go down, up and down, up and down. A lot of times, the guys that are pressuring it, Davenport may pressure, and we may see Danielle Hunter's sack rates go up because he's
Yes.
pushing the pocket that way, right? Or one of the interior guys gets it because he's pushing. But no matter what it is, it puts the QB under pressure, and we all know quarterbacks do not thrive under pressure. Their passing rates, completions rate go down, some way down. And so I think that's going to be a good thing. Throw that in with all the mix and magic that Flores is going to do. We may have a very, very good defense this year. Better than we thought. Put it that way. Better than we thought. Most people think, we'll get to 20. It may be north of that, folks.
Even 20 would be pretty sweet when you were 31st last year. But Davenport is one of those guys. Like he has had consistently in his 5 years in the league, he's had consistently pretty good, solid pressure rates, sometimes very good, even when the sacks haven't been there. So, like you said, David, the sacks don't tell the whole story. But he's had trouble staying healthy. If he can stay healthy and play like he's been capable of, like he did in 2021 with the Saints when he got, we're going to use the sack number again, when he got 9.5 sacks. But if he can play that way, he's going to be a big, big asset to the Vikings defense, and he's going to be well worth the $13 million that we're paying for him. Now, the other side of this is that why I have the bullseye on him is that if he doesn't play that well, if if he doesn't have the impact that we're hoping for, if he doesn't even take that step up that that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah was gambling on when he made this signing, because Davenport's had a certain amount of production so far, but he was a very, 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 very high draft pick and has never really played up to that draft status. But the talent is there. You see it when you watch
Mm-hmm.
Davenport, you watch his tape. And if Kwesi Adofo-Mensah has made that gamble on him and that he could even play better than he did in 2021. Well, but if he doesn't do that, if he doesn't provide the kind of pass rate pressure that we're hoping for, that's going to be a big problem for the Vikings defense because, of course, then really they're only going to have to account for Danielle Hunter, I think, as an edge
Right.
rusher most of the time. And unless somebody like DJ Wanham or Patrick Jones III has a breakout year, and that's not really something I'm banking on. So Marcus Davenport to me is a real key player for this Vikings defense, and a guy that, again, I got the bullseye on. I'm going to be watching, and he's going to be a guy that the Vikings' defensive success hinges on all 11 guys playing. But some guys I think are going to have a bigger impact than others, and Marcus Davenport is going to be one of those guys. I think that he's going to, if he's playing really well, is going to be that impact is going to be very, very big for us.
Mm-hmm. I agree. He's got to stay healthy, like Davey says. Well, we have the best training room in the business right now, as graded by the players. Hopefully that helps. We had that concern with Danielle Hunter, and he stayed healthy last year. So we shall see. And even Za'Darius was healthy enough to play. Now, he whined that his knee was still hurt, but he had to play because of the way his contract was written. Well, but he was good enough to get out there on the field. So that's a credit to the training room.
It is, and we've seen it before. They would not play a player that they didn't think. I don't believe that they didn't think was capable of, as they like to say, protecting himself out there and playing at an ability where he wasn't hurting himself and the team.
Right. Yeah, injuring himself further. Yep. Well, that brings us to the second guy you have a target on his back. Second-year player, second-round draft choice, the big stud at right guard, Mr. Ed Ingram.
Not a stud yet, Dave. Hopefully he'll be one, but yeah,
Don't tell
Ed
his
Ingram is
girlfriend that.
yeah, but Ingram is a guy that I've got the bullseye on this year because we know he struggled last year as a rookie, starting at right guard, gave up a lot of pressures, gave up a lot of sacks. However, it's not unusual for a rookie to struggle in the NFL. Dave, you always talk about the 3 or 4 year rule with offensive linemen. Give them at least 3 or 4. It takes them that long to really get it, to come into their own as offensive linemen. And we've seen that with some of the Vikings offensive linemen recently. But Ingram is not in year 3 yet.
He's going into year 2. Yep.
But
so we're anticipating a much larger step up than what we saw last year. Just because of time and working together, I would think.
Well, I guess I don't know if I'm expecting it or if it's more hoping for it, but I feel that if Ed Ingram does take that step up, if he does play to the capabilities and show why the Vikings selected him high in the second round last year and drafted him that high, which was a little bit maybe higher than some people expected who were looking for the draft. I think he was looked at maybe going in the 3rd round, maybe even the 4th round by, if you looked at some draft experts. But if he can play to the level that he was drafted at, I think that's going to be huge for the Vikings because I think the Vikings offensive line could be pretty good this year. Christian Darrisaw is a stud at left tackle. Brian O'Neill, if he returns healthy from that partially torn Achilles, we know he's a very good right tackle, as solid as they come, very high-performing guy. Garrett Bradbury is coming off of his best year as a pro last year. Turned into a really solid center. And Ezra Cleveland, same thing. He probably hit his best year as a pro in his 3rd season. So I think there's a real good base there amongst the 4 out of the 5. Ed Ingram is the guy who really could make this unit something very good, something we haven't seen for with the Vikings offensive line in a long, long time. If he can step it up, if he can really move up and up his level of play, like you're talking about, Dave, that's going to help the offensive line immensely. Kirk Cousins is going to not get that pressure on the right side up the middle that he doesn't like to get, and we could have the best offensive line we've had here since 2009. Really, that year we went to the NFC Championships game with you had McKinney and Load on the tackles. You had at guard you had Herrera and Hutch at guard, and at center you had John Sullivan. Right?
Sully.
Yeah, that could be the offense, and for us to have that kind of an offensive line, it's been that long since we've had something that solid. I think that Ed Ingram, if he can play to the level that he's capable of, that could be the offensive line that the Vikings are looking at, which is going to be huge for the Vikings offense. The running game is going to be more effective. Kirk Cousins will have more time to pass the ball, and you're not going to see as many 3-and-outs as you saw last year, as you've seen the last 2 years. But if Ed Ingram does not play that way, if he still struggles, close to what he did as a rookie, then I think Kirk Cousins is still going to remain one of the most hit quarterbacks in the NFL.
Well, part of that's on himself now. But yes, I expect it to increase. They were a good run blocking team last year. They're going to should be better this year. Just the whole second year thing. And who was it? And I've said it before. Jason talked about how Brian O'Neill says he and Ed are starting to think alike during film study. And Ed's answering stuff, they're finishing each other's sentences. There's that growing love affair between right guard and right tackle. That's a wonderful thing. Let it happen. So be it said. So let it be. Sort of thing. I don't think he's gonna get any worse. I think he's gonna take a significant step up. That's my assessment. I know some people don't agree, but I see this kid having great potential to be a very good guard for the Minnesota Vikings.
And if nothing else, Dave, like he saw a lot of crap last year as a rookie, getting thrown in like he did. And I think that just that experience, whether it's good or bad, is going to be helpful for him as a pro in his second year. And yeah, going through all those struggles, I think that should help you if it doesn't destroy your confidence. And there's been no indication that I've seen that Ed Ingram is down on himself. Okay,
right.
That's a better test for you than standing on the sidelines for a whole year and getting mental reps.
Right. Exactly. I'm not worried about it. Like I mentioned before, a name that popped up, I think this morning, Cameron Bynum may be one of those that has a bullseye on his back if he does not perform in whatever capacity this preseason. Yeah, he was a starter last year. He beat out Seam to start. The fact that they may let him go would sort of blow my mind, but that safety room is awful full. That's why I'd like to see him come down and play more nickel, be a more versatile DB, not just safety, not just corner, but play both. But we'll see as possible.
Hey, make guys earn it. Like you had the 31st defensive unit last year. There shouldn't be too many people who are safe on that unit.
Correct. You are 100% correct.
I know you can't replace everybody, but yeah.
Aaron says Jaren Hall to put pressure on Cousins. Hey, run like me. See how you can escape the pocket. Speaking of Jaren Hall, let's go on to Theme 3. Thanks for the transition, Aaron. The draftee spotlight, Jaren Hall.
Getting back to this, Dave, because the last show we had, I postponed it because we had the Zadarius Smith trade and we wanted to talk about that. So I'm going to be giving a fan's perspective on each of the Vikings 6 draftees. We did Dwayne McBride a couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, and now finally getting to Jaren Hall. who was the 164th pick in the 5th round for the Minnesota Vikings. And but anytime your favorite team drafts a quarterback, usually it doesn't matter what round it is, there's some level of interest in that selection because it was a quarterback, especially when you've got the quarterback history that the Vikings have had since Fran Tarkenton retired, which isn't very good. Um, we've been looking for a replacement for Fran pretty much ever since. And so yeah, like we got Hall. People might remember during the draft that there was a bit of a run on quarterbacks in that round. Clayton Tune got picked pretty early, like the third pick in. I think third or fourth pick in the 5th round, and then not too far after him, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, who the Vikings had in for one of their top 30 visits at Egan, he got selected. And then several picks after that, that team from Wisconsin selected that Clifford kid from Penn State, who apparently isn't very good. So well done.
The scouting report has a hard time throwing a football, and he plays quarterback.
Yeah. Yes. And then a few picks after that, the Vikings selected Jaren Hall. Again, of great interest to Vikings fans because he is a quarterback. And so I wanted to, look into it a little bit again, dive into it a bit from a fan's perspective. If you want more X and O's on this, I would suggest that folks watching the show check the First and SKOL on YouTube and take a look at Tyler Fornes did a deep dive on Jaren Hall a couple of weeks ago, I think, Dave. It might have been, I don't know the exact date.
Oh, I
but
think
it's on there.
Done a few of them ever since we drafted him. And even before, he did when he was a candidate. Yes, he liked him.
So if you want Tyler's perspective on Jaren Hall, which is be more detailed than anything I'll give you, take a look at that show that he did a few weeks ago. Well worth your time. But however, we'll get into my uneducated view on Jaren Hall. And I guess some of the pros with the positives with Jaren Hall, at least from my perspective, after I watched a few games, like every snap, 2 or 3 or 4 games that I could find on YouTube was, the first thing is that you're getting a guy with a lot of experience. Unlike Anthony Richardson, who basically started 1 year with Florida, he gets picked in the top 5. Jaren Hall is a guy who's got 718 career throws under his belt. 670 of those came in the last 2 seasons. Remember, he was stuck behind Zach Wilson in 2019 and 2020, so he didn't really get to play.
Right.
But after that, he was Brigham Young's main starter. 718 career throws, and a lot of throws the past 2 years. A lot of starting experience, impressive production during those 2 years. Overall in his career, he had 52 touchdowns and only 11 interceptions, completed 65% of his passes. That's all good. And then last year in 2022, threw for 3,100 yards. I think he had 31 or 32 touchdowns and only 6 interceptions. And completed 66% of his passes. So really impressive production there. I think, one thing that it's mentioned is that he's an athletic quarterback. He's a good runner. Well, what I've noticed about him is that what I like about Jaren Hall and his running ability is that, he's not Lamar Jackson or anything like that. He's not going to spin and beat guys. And also he's not like Lamar Jackson in that he doesn't run to run. Like when Hall runs, it's with a purpose. He runs to extend plays. He's always got his eyes looking down the field, but most of the time they did have designed runs for him, but some of his runs are basically, okay, there's nothing more I can do passing wise. I've exhausted all my options. Nobody's open. I've just got to make a play. So he's not a guy who's just going to run when the first read is not there and take off, because that's just what he's always done. He runs when it's kind of a last resort thing, unless it's a designed run. I like that about Jaren Hall. The fact that he's not just going to bail out of the pocket and take off.
Yeah, when the first read's covered, panic, I got to run. Sort of deal. No, he's not that type.
Another thing that I liked about him, as far as his throwing, was that he seemed to have, there's numerous instances of this in the games I watch, is that he's got a real good touch and feel for the back shoulder throw, which is a very, very important and a tough throw to make at the NFL level. But he seems to have a knack, like I said, a real good feel for that. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's an important thing for any NFL quarterback these days, because so many throws are made to like where the DB cannot see, has no idea where the football is. Only the receiver and the quarterback knows where it is. And Jaren Hall can make that throw, and he made it well at the college level, which I think bodes well at the NFL level for him. He doesn't have the strongest arm, and that's been noted. Like he doesn't have a cannon, but it's strong enough to get the job done. From what I've seen, he's been able to make all the throws at all levels: deep, short, intermediate, whatever. So I think that's his arm strength doesn't concern me. The thing that's been talked about as a negative for him has been his age. He turned 25 in March, so that's a bit old. I kind of look at it the other way, Dave. I don't know about you. Is that to me, you're getting an experience. You're getting a man right now. You're not getting a boy. You're getting a man. He's mature. He's intelligent. He knows that he's only got so much time to make this happen. So he's going to work his ass off. He's going to work his ass off while he's mature enough, and he's going to work his ass off. He's going to understand what it takes to be a professional football player, to be a professional NFL quarterback, and he's going to put in the work. He's not going to be worried about, going to the strip
Chasing
club
girls
or,
and, yep.
or all that other stuff. He's a mature adult. He's a man. So I actually think that his age, considering the situation he's in, where he's not like, he's going to be mature enough to realize I've got to take my dues. I've got to earn playing time. I've got to earn a backup job. I've got to earn a starting job. It's not going to be handed to me. And so I like that about him. I also like the fact that, Brigham Young doesn't always play the strongest schedule, but he played a number of, schools, power schools, traditional power schools in his 2 years. And for the most part, he played pretty well against them. They played Baylor twice. He played pretty well against them. Oregon, USC, Notre Dame, Arkansas, Utah, even Virginia, in the ACC. Unlike Dwayne McBride, unlike Dwayne McBride, who we profiled a couple of weeks ago, who hardly played any good schools at University of Alabama, Birmingham, and had humongous stats, Hall has actually performed pretty well against tougher opposition. Again, that's not always everything, but I think that that's important, the level of competition that he's played and how he's played against that level of competition. So I think those are all strengths for him. Some of the cons would be he's got no experience under center at all. And so that is something that I don't know what it is, why that's such a big deal for quarterbacks. Maybe it's just the different look. Like if you're in shotgun or pistol all the time, Dave, the play is always in front of you, right? Whereas if you're under center, you've got your back to the play, and then you turn around and then the guys are on you. Maybe that's a big difference, but he's going to have to adjust to that at the pro level. And that's something that quarterbacks who've been in spread offenses, who've always been in shotgun, a lot of them do struggle with that at the pro level. So we'll see how he adjusts to that. I think a strange thing about him, I think, is that this is just what I found, is that he misses badly on some pretty simple throws more often than I would like, especially when he's on the run or when he's pressured. And we know that I think that's a bit of a red flag for me, because you got to make the simple throws, right?
Aaron's reading our script. He's got to be.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you got to be able to make the simple throws. Like when that play is there, when the gimmies, you got to be able to make it. And also in the NFL, and particularly in recent years with the Vikings, how often is it a clean pocket for the quarterback? Not as much as it's going to be in BYU. You've got to be able to make throws under pressure, and when you're pressured. And Hall has sometimes, in the games I've watched, has sometimes struggled with that. I think some people might disagree with me, but when I looked at the games, I guess one other concern I had, and it's kind of hard to describe, is that I just didn't see many wow plays, if you know what I mean, like where Hall made a play and I thought, man, I haven't seen anybody make that throw or make that run. He made the plays, but again, the wow plays weren't there for me. I don't know. You kind of I like to see that from a college. You want to see that freakish nature from a college player, because that's going to translate at the pro level. I didn't really see enough of that from Hall, but maybe I just wasn't watching the right games. But so those are some of the pros and cons with him. I think the good thing with Hall is that he's athletic enough and he's been productive enough that I think the fifth round was a good time for the Vikings to take a shot. If when I looked at the fifth round, and they also selected Jalen Roy in the fifth round too, but like if I look through the fifth round, there's nobody I'm seeing there that I would have preferred over Hall, really.
Right.
So hey, they took a shot at a quarterback. He's athletic. He may work out, he may not, but unfortunately, like I forgot to mention this earlier, but Football Outsiders did a study in 2017
This
of
one.
quarterbacks selected in every round from since 1996, I think, up until 2017, and the fifth round quarterbacks were particularly grim. I think the best of them was
Let
AJ
me blow
Feely,
that
who
up
was
so people can see
yeah.
if I can.
AJ Feely was probably about the best
Uh,
of that whole crew. So there's not a lot of great history recently, and even not so recently with quarterbacks picked in the fifth round. Um,
you can see
and that
there's a
wouldn't
huge drop off in what's
not
expected. Now, people go, but look at the sixth. What
yeah.
what threw off the sixth round numbers so much? Do you know?
Well, it'd be Tom Brady for one.
Tom Brady. And Tom Brady wasn't the only one.
Yeah.
Bulger was on there. There's just quite a few good quarterbacks in the sixth.
Now,
But Brady was the
is
big one.
is is Jaren Hall gonna reverse that trend? I don't know. I think the
He
good
may be
thing
the
is that
first. I
yep,
mean,
he may be the first.
they said there's what, three fifth rounders that have made it to the playoffs. Only one of them's won. Let him be the first
Mhm.
next year, not
Uh,
this year. Next
yeah,
year.
I for Hall though, like I think the good thing here is that Kevin O'Connell's going to get Hall in the lab for a
Mm-hmm.
year, right? There's no pressure. Hall is if things go the way we want them to, Hall is not going to play this year. He might not even dress, although the three quarterback rule now probably does mean
He's
he
going
gets
to dress.
dressed.
Yeah.
But he's not going to play unless it's some huge mop up situation in a game that doesn't matter. But Kevin O'Connell's going to get him in a lab. He's going to get to see him for like almost 12 months. He's going to get to work with him. We're going to get to see how good of a quarterback development, like how good Kevin O'Connell is at developing young quarterbacks. So they're going to get to see him. They're going to get a real good look, and they'll should have I think a pretty good idea after a year. Like, is this guy worth investing more time in, or do we need to draft somebody? Go back in 2024 and draft somebody either really, really high or maybe a little bit earlier than the fifth round again. And even if Hall does look like he has some promise, the fact that he was picked in the fifth round, that doesn't preclude the Vikings
Mm-hmm.
from drafting a quarterback high in the
Next year.
first round as well. So uh, to me, like Hall is a guy that I don't expect him to beat Nick Mullins out of the backup job even this year. This is going to be strictly a development year for him. He's going to learn. He's going to sit. He's going to watch. He's going to soak things up. He'll be okay with that, and we'll get to see him a lot in preseason. And I think that we'll know in preseason whether this guy is like Nate Stanley and has no chance, or whether he is somebody who might actually turn into something. And he kind of reminds me a bit of actually Taylor Heinicke, the former Viking. He's probably got a bit better arm than Heinicke, but Heinicke is a guy like scrappy, mobile, good at making plays off script, and he's been an excellent backup in the NFL, and he actually hasn't been too bad a starter at times either. I think
Mm-hmm.
that you know,
And
you know,
his teammates love him.
yes,
And the
fiery
chemistry
guy.
with that is a massive bonus.
So to me, I think that Hall, realistically, if I'm looking at it, if I'm looking at the history of fifth rounders who've been picked, if I'm looking at the scouting reports on Hall, if I'm looking at what I've seen in games, I kind of feel like Hall, I don't see him as being like the future starting quarterback. Happy to be proven wrong, but I think that he could be a very good backup for the Vikings, maybe eventually, or with some other team in 2 or 3 years. But that's how I see him. But still, who knows, right? Like who knows?
Mm-hmm.
He could be Mark Bulger. He could be Tom
Mm-hmm.
Brady.
Yep. Yeah.
We hope he's
You never.
Tom Brady.
Yep. Absolutely. Or San Francisco kid, I,
Brock Purdy. Yeah.
Brock Purdy. You never know. And you talked about KOC's he's in his lab. He's already starting to work. He's already trying to teach him, working on footsteps and working on I can't do it anymore. My shoulders are shot. But an more overhand throw, because he does throw sidearm and a bunch of other stuff. It's going to be an interesting experiment. I can't wait to see him, even through training camp, the on-field reps that we're going to get to be able to see, but especially in those preseason games, how he reacts, how well does he play, is he hitting where the receivers are supposed to be, because he may be throwing the receivers 5, 6, 7, further down, 8, 9, and they may not be where they're supposed to be, but how is he playing in orchestrating the offense? And that's going to be interesting.
Yeah, and if he's money and if he's hitting guys and he's moving the offense, considering the players he's going to be playing with in preseason, which won't be the starters and likely won't even be the backups in some cases, I think that's going to tell a lot too about his potential. If you look at Brock Purdy last year with the 49ers, we didn't think anything of it at the time, but if you remember when they played the Vikings in the preseason game, like Purdy played like outstanding. And he played outstanding the whole preseason. Again, not with the top guys, but when he got a chance with the top guys, well, hey, he didn't miss a beat.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, well, that is your preview on Jaren Hall. I agree. I look forward to seeing him play. I think this is going to be fun to watch him and watch Kevin O'Connell develop him. That's why we hired Kevin O'Connell as our head coach. Find that next quarterback, develop him, and hopefully we'll find that, the guy, the homegrown replacement that we haven't had since Fran Tarkenton.
So. Dave, if for Hall, like in your perfect world, like roughly percentage-wise, how many snaps would you like to see him get in the preseason games as opposed to Mullins? We know Cousins probably isn't going to play at all.
Right, and then you got Mullins,
who doesn't really need a lot of work.
75%, ish. If you're going to take between those two, I think we did sign there's Camp Arm, I think. You might see that guy, but the majority of them. And I want to see the majority of him working that. Yes, I agree, 100%. Well, that brings the end to the focus on this draftee. Who's your next one?
Next one is going to be Jake Hillen-Roy, LSU defensive tackle.
Another big round belly on the defensive side. Mm-hmm. Now, that brings us to the end of the show. But there's one more announcement to be made. Justin said it on his show last night. He did a simulcast with Rap, but he announced that Purple and Gold for Days is coming to Vikings First and SKOL in June on our podcast side. He's going to be a podcast partner. So if you listen to podcasts, which I highly encourage you to do, because Vikings First and SKOL puts out some podcast-only stuff. Your morning daily opener is there at least 5 days a week, where I talk about the news. We have Skolling with Friends there. It's podcast only. And coming in June, Purple and Gold for Days will also be doing not only some podcast versions of his show, but some podcast only offerings as part of Vikings First and SKOL. And we all want to welcome Justin to the team. He's going to make a great addition.
Very good. Awesome addition for the First and SKOL, Vikings First and SKOL. Happy to see Justin joining.
Yep. It's going to help us grow, folks. And like we talked about, it's about the community, and we want to bring it all together. The more the better. We love our viewers and listeners on both, no matter which is your preferred medium. And of course, if you can't watch, you can always listen at work, when you need time away, whenever. We're there. Just look us up, Vikings First and SKOL, on your favorite aggregator, and you'll find us. And Mary saying, catch my daily opener. That's where I get into my NPR voice and tell you the news of the last 24 hours. It's a good way to catch up.
Sure is.
Any last words there, buddy?
Aaron's asking if we're going to keep our kicker down there or
That's
replace him with the Georgia
another one
kid.
that may have a target on his back. Because we did hire, or did sign that young rookie.
Yeah, I would first kind of take on that is that I think Joseph will stick around because he's got a better leg than the Georgia kid. The Georgia kid doesn't have the big leg, as I understand it. But hey, if you keep on missing extra points and the Georgia kid and your preseason is poor, then that can change quickly. And even during the season, if Joseph really starts going like Dan Bailey, Blair Walsh on us, maybe it won't be the Podlesny kid from Georgia who takes his job, but it could be somebody else. Like his job certainly is. It's with the kickers. It's always dependent on the next kick and the previous two they had. Right, like if you miss 3 kicks in a row, suddenly you've got a kicker crisis. And Joseph has had some rough stretches in his 2 years with the Vikings. So he's just got to keep on making field goals and extra points, and he has had some issues with those.
Yep, could be. Justin's brought up. In fact, Monday is Memorial Day. We honor those that have fallen in the defense of the United States. You've got something similar up there, don't you? I mean, we get Veterans Day in November, but we all celebrate that. But you have a memorial?
There's a day, but it's not a stat holiday. November 11th is always Remembrance Day. That's actually the day where we remember the fallen, the people who have served for Canada in wars past and wars present, but not multiple days. Last week was actually we had Needler's Day. We were celebrating Queen Victoria.
Gotta love it. Well, on Monday and this weekend, I remember those friends of mine that I've lost, friends and acquaintances, and then all that I served with. This is their weekend, and it's a solemn weekend for many of us, but we also intend to have a good time because that's what they would have wanted. So I encourage everybody out there to have a good time this weekend. Be safe. Remember those that have fallen, to give us what we have. And what do we say?
We say SKOL Vikings, baby.
SKOL Vikings! Like, subscribe, and ring the bell. And rate us on your favorite podcast aggregator. Darren and Dave, thank you for watching this episode of Two Old Bloggers. We look forward to seeing you on every show on the new Vikings First and SKOL. You can find our podcast as part of the Fans First Sports Network. Sports takes for the fan, from the fan. SKOL, everybody!